Good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for being with us tonight. Kerry, welcome to my new show. It's going to be a new show on my channel, since I used to host on your channel a show for the last couple of years, actually, alongside a few great show hosts that you welcome on your channel, PC.
Yes.
My channel is called DTV, Dimensions TV, and this is the new all in English speaking guests, and I'll be hosting a few guests as the months go by. And you're the first one. I owe you that one because I was your host on your channel. So welcome, Kerry.
Thank you so much.
So my listeners will probably know you, but I'll do a short recap. You're a longtime whistleblower, contactee as well, sociologist, journalist and actress, truth seeker and activist. You founded the Project Camelot, an alternative media for investigation, about what, 20 years ago? Is that correct?
Actually, no, 11 and a half years ago.
Oh, okay, 11 and a half years ago. Okay. It seems like in the alternative world, you've been around for a while, so I wasn't sure. And you've been conducting sensitive interviews on all four corners of the globe, and totally away from the mainstream, single-minded approach. Your favorite topics include ET, extraterrestrial presence, the New World Order, the future of mankind and our planet, which are closely linked, the Matrix, Black projects, the secret space program, and the shadow government, and so forth, and Black projects. Today we're going to talk about well, actually your news, because you just came out of a Dublin conference called the Ireland Awakens conference in Dublin. Right?
That's correct. Yes.
Mm-hmm. How was that?
Well, it was a fascinating conference. It was fun being in Ireland and meeting all the people, and it was quite an experience. We went on a one-day tour to what's called Newgrange, which is a fascinating site that clearly appears to be, in essence, a Stargate. And we also went to what's called St. Patrick's Chair and Well. Miles Johnston led us up there, and there's a person that was part of his, I think it was Radio Caroline, who was abducted there several times. So it's a very sort of mystical place, and we put the pictures from that area out on the web, on Facebook, etc. And you could probably grab one, put one here if you like. Anyway, it was fun, and it has lots of energetics, and I feel earth energies, so I'm very in touch with that. And I can say there's a portal there. Apparently the beings seem to come through at least from within the mountain right there. And there are lots of gaps and openings within the mountain that are kind of hidden in the rocks. So it's in a forest as well. It's quite a mystical place.
Yes, actually, Ireland is quite a mystical place. I've been to Dublin, a really great city, a few times, and had a lot of fun there. Loved the pubs and the Riverdance shows, and the Leprechaun Museum and the Dublin Museum, where you can see a famous Vikings event called the Ragnarok. I don't know if you've visited it.
No, I didn't see that, actually.
The Leprechaun Museum it could seem funny at first, but I discovered a few things there. The changeling phenomenon with the fairies that used to, it's in their legends and local legends in Ireland. They used to take the baby boys under 2, and the people with to take into their world and so that they can reproduce themselves, procreate, and replace them by like dark eyes babies that are like almost soulless. So the in the legend Irish parents used to dress the little boys like girls, until 2 years old. So that's quite amazing. And the leprechaun and giants causeway and the giants causeway between Ireland and Scotland. There's a lot of amazing stories about this, the Celtic legends of Ireland. Really, I really appreciated it.
Yes, in theory, I'm named after the County Kerry, so I do appreciate all of that. I can say that I did have a vision while I was there in the hotel right after we'd arrived and went to sleep that night. I happened to see an incredible vision of Egypt rising out of the lands of Ireland. And it was quite extraordinary, and it was so powerful that when I woke up in the morning, I actually expected to part my curtains and see Egypt out my window, and it was really amazing. So I am very well, I guess you might say, tuned in to the fact that Ireland used to be part of Atlantis and to what is in essence Egypt, or the Egyptian civilization. Way back when. So there is a hidden mystery in that place of Ireland.
Right. I totally agree. The reason that at first that I wanted to interview you a little bit sooner before is because of the after your interview with Robert Steele.
Right.
Banned in some countries, which ones actually? Do you remember which countries it was banned in?
No, YouTube doesn't tell me that. It just simply told me that it was banned in some countries. So I don't know which ones.
And a French friend of mine actually did the translation, the transcripts into French.
Okay, great.
And you wrote a couple of really interesting articles this summer after that. That prompted this interview after your Robert Steele interview. One was called Disclosure Teams, Reptilian Push on August 5th, 2017 with Captain Mark Richards that claims regarding reptilian disclosure in Mosul in Iraq. We'll try to go over the various points that you brought up, not all of them, but specifically the topic of disclosure teams backed by various factions, within the deep state military industrial complex known as the secret government. What can we truly expect in regards to disclosure, and whom would it benefit? And we'll go over that. And your next article also that really struck me was Evidence by Any Other Name on August 10th. Regarding the 2017 Mufon panel discussion on video, and the speakers including Richard Dolan, William Tompkins that is no longer with us, that actually was deceased on the eclipse day, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you were the last one, I think, to interview him, if I'm correct.
Actually, he'd been interviewed periodically by Rents, I believe, but my interview with him is a 3-hour interview, quite significant, I will say that.
Right. And Corey Goode was there, Andy Basiago, Michael Salla, the Mufon director, who near the end, in essence, said that he had seen no evidence presented. So that's stunning, and that's reminds me of the French situation, which is much worse, because we don't even talk about ETs in mainstream. Well, this is not mainstream, but the Mufon France is held up by two reptilian scapegoats that I know personally. So anyway, I won't mention their names, but they took over the Mufon recently. I hope they don't listen to me, but anyway. The former Mufon director in France was the former director of the GEPAN. The GEPAN is the official mainstream, the French NASA, if you will, the CNES that sends our rockets, the Ariane rocket to in orbit, supposedly, and also a lot more often in deep ocean off the coast of Guyana. But anyway, he was the former director, and that didn't last 6 months, and they closed down. But the ones that are handling it now, I think they have an agenda, and we'll go over Mufon and who really writes up the reports behind Mufon. I mean, they sponsor a great TV series in the U.S. that's translated into French called Hangar One, right? With where I interviewed Michael Schrapp from the series, and you did an interview with Michael as well. And
yes, I've interviewed Michael over the years several times.
Right. And so we'll go over that. And also you mentioned sometimes the white hats reports, and I'll ask you what, who they are, and what trust value can we give them, and why? Because it seems that we live in a great deception. This world is about an illusion. If we consider that this world is nothing but a holographic projection, a dream being dreamed or imagined, like it looks like a dream within a dream, sometimes a nightmare. Everything, including us and gods or false gods, or would be emanations or extension projections of our own consciousness, basically. So it looks like a divine drama, like a Hollywood drama. Maybe we'll talk about Hollywood real quick. A cosmic play. So within this cosmic play that looks like any dream, really, there are like archetypes and symbols, and it looks like this duality imposed upon us is being played out by the same sources of intel, for example, that have been misinforming people for at least 70 years in modern, intel world, since the OSS became the CIA and so forth, and the Nazis went over to the U.S. and worked with the intel propaganda, and NASA is basically Nazi. I mean, do you agree with that?
Well, they're certainly infiltrated. I will say that.
Okay, all right. Let's go over what Captain Mark Richards said in your first article this summer on August 5th. Let me find it here real quick. All right. So he mentioned that there was going to be a battle in Mosul in Iraq, right?
Yes, I believe the actual battle happened in Aleppo, and I think Mosul was one of the cities where he was suggesting that there was going to be a heavy, battle going on, and there was, in fact, a heavy battle in Mosul. But Aleppo seemed to be where it all kind of centered eventually. Mm-hmm. And what he was basically talking about was the fact that the battle is with a reptoid race of beings that have decided to build a Stargate that will allow them to bring in equipment from their side, and also which are basically craft that are the size of aircraft carriers, and that those craft can bring in, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think there's something around like 5,000 troops. And then at the same time, they can also take back, to their world, in essence, which is, I believe, the what you call the Draco galaxy, or the Draco constellation, really. So they can take back 30,000 to 40,000 human beings who are either alive or dead as slaves. And so this is an operation that they're conducting. And he said that is what the war in the Middle East and the wars going on there are really with the race of reptoids. And that basically the Stargate that they're trying to open is also an effort to, in essence, force disclosure here on planet Earth, that they feel that if disclosure were to happen at this time, there would be mad panics in the streets, and that that kind of panic would help them to take over the world, in essence. So they are pushing the envelope. And what is not completely clear, although Mark did seem to say that the battle in Aleppo is now more or less concluded, and that in essence this has been stopped for a period of time. it's an ongoing story, and so it's really quite never ending in the Middle East in this regard.
Right, right. It seems that way, but I guess the real stakes there are the Stargates and the occult agenda, right? Not the oil and maybe some black aspect to it. Because some people say, well, there's some whistleblowers. Also in France, there's one that mentions the oil as being, the fossil fuels as being carrying the parasites into the air, the atmosphere. It's sort of reminds me of that black goo thing that you've mentioned.
I can imagine where they might draw those conclusions, but even if that is going on, it's not the real story.
Okay, all right. What would be the real story about oil, actually? So,
well, in regard to the oil, it has more to do with what happened, the oil spill specifically in the area of the Gulf of California, and I had whistleblowers from behind the scenes as well as other people. Miles Johnson is a person who's investigated this, as well as David Griffin has gone down this rabbit hole, if you will, quite far. These are investigators, journalists that are out on the circuit doing investigations. The bottom line is that the Marconi scientists, I believe there were around 25, and I think there's actually more than that have now died over the span of time, having to do with the battle in what was in essence the Falkland Islands area, which then carried on into the Gulf, and that this oil spill that happened in more modern times that we know of had to do with this black goo, in essence, that is an artificially intelligent substance that was eating the bottoms of the boats, apparently, in the Gulf, and that this is why the oil spill happened, that it was actually caused to happen. It was not an accident. Or exit was put in place to deal with this artificial intelligence and try to stop it. Whether it's been successful or not is a whole nother matter. But that is the overall story to do with the black goo and oil, in essence. And I have actually a number of whistleblowers. Some of my sources have never come forward into public, but I can tell you that the information I have is that this is quite a substantial story and that it is correct in terms of the black goo and the oil spill in the Gulf area.
Right. So it's linked to artificial intelligence, but isn't it linked to the parasites that are ruling this dimension?
Well, my understanding is that, again, that was placed there, and this gets back also to a whistleblower contactee who dealt with a race of a type of a blue ET, and this is not a blue avian, but a blue ET that I guess is a kind of a gray race, but they are blue, and they tend to be, from what I understand, more sort of pro-human, positively oriented towards our race. And that this particular whistleblower from New Zealand, whose name is escaping me at this exact moment, I think he wrote a book called Coevolution, something like that. At any rate, he had contact with them. They actually talked about this artificial intelligence, this black goo, being put as a sort of life form, in a sense, if you want to call artificial intelligence a life form, into the planet to be awakened at a certain juncture, and that it then became awakened, as I say. And so this is what we're talking about. Now, some people may refer to this artificial intelligence as parasites, but that's not my understanding of it, just for what it's worth.
Okay. All right. Well, I know Robert Stanley, whom I interviewed on your channel, mentioned something about Enki being Lucifer and also a mind parasite, so which is
actually, I have had Robert Stanley on my show, and I believe he has that wrong. There is a controversy out there as to whether Enki or Enlil is so-called Lucifer, or this negative oriented being. And the evidence I have is that, and this is quite across the board really, the understanding is that Enki was the one who actually was trying to safeguard humanity, that Enlil came in, and that goes back to the Sumerian tablets, the drama that was described there. Enlil was the one that wanted to do away with humanity, did not want humanity to rebel or to become more intelligent. Enki did use his DNA and basically mated with various humans, and also there was installed at that time what we call a frequency fence in the DNA of humanity that is now breaking down, actually, all these years later. And that was around 12,000 years ago, as my understanding is. And Enki was in charge of Africa, and he was the geneticist, the doctor, and he and his sister, Inanna, I believe she's known as, one of her names, and worked together in this capacity. And that actually Enlil was never in favor of humanity, and that there is a split in humanity. That split in humanity has to do with one faction which has, in essence, rebelled and tends to rebel and has what I named this is my moniker, but a rebel gene. And the basically has the sort of wherewithal to think for itself. Whereas Enlil was all about the sort of administrators who were under his control. And he certainly did not want to see humans basically progress. The fear with the Anunnaki and the humans, the issue that they've had between them, is that humanity, even which came from a race of beings even before the Anunnaki came to this planet, and we come from the stars. We were not created by the Anunnaki. That's also a misconception. But nonetheless, what happened was that what was created here was a race of sort of a split between different factions of humanity. And you can actually see this in our everyday lives playing out here on planet Earth at this time. So it's an interesting story. Of course, you have to go back to the Sumerians' tablets to get the real translation and to get the real story. It's not good enough, in my opinion, to jump to conclusions. Now, there is a faction of the followers of Marduk and also others who very likely will want to paint Enki in a dark light because that facilitates their agenda. But I think that's a confusion on their part.
Yes, but isn't there a light bearer called Lucifer that's posing as the good guy, just like Enki is among Anunnakis, but in the end, weren't humans engineered as slaves to begin with? So they were deactivated as far as their DNA.
Well, again, the frequency fence that was put in place apparently came down through a ruling in the Anunnaki because they found that humans were growing so fast that they were basically going to become their equals very quickly. And so they wanted to stop that. So this, what we call a frequency fence, was put into our DNA. It seems to be have been pretty pervasive, even in all the different incarnations in the various races, because we humans are a composite of 12 or more ET races. So it's quite a complex melting pot, if you will. But the idea of Lucifer is really identical to Satan, and in essence is artificial intelligence, just in case you don't know that. There is a link up between all three. And I do talk about this in my interview that you even mentioned, I guess, before this show, I think, having to do with Robert David Steele and the understanding that it can help people to understand that there is a sort of a split again, and it has to do with the mirror versus the reality, the creator versus the image of the creator, or us versus our image. And so the Satanists, as well as the Luciferians, have fallen in love with the image, and that image is also artificial intelligence.
Right. Well, even Jesuits say they worship or venerate a goddess called Sophia, like the Gnostics, but it wasn't the same Sophia that the Gnostics mentioned. Well, or no, there's even a black Madonna or a dark goddess, and maybe she manifests as Inanna, Isis, Venus, Lucifer, etc., etc. There's so many references to a hive mind. We can think of the Borg Queen, and what is this hive mind about? Isn't it this hive mind that you see in all the actually Hollywood movies? Say that collective consciousness is where we should go when we leave our physical existence or body, and that's where unity is. But isn't that a mistake? Isn't this a false light?
Well, I think you're putting a lot of things all together in the same pot, so to speak, and I think it's understandable that you would do that because there's so much complexity, and there are lots of names for similar gods and goddesses, et cetera, and I think there's a lot of, at this time, this late juncture, there's a lot of misdirects in essence. So when you're talking about a hive mind, first of all, the Greys have a hive mind. Various ET races absolutely have a hive mind. Humanity does not at this time. Now, collective consciousness is not necessarily a hive mind. You have to understand what is a hive mind. And this has to do a lot with also reptilians are a hive mind. It has to do with the fact that they don't have an individuality that thinks for itself and can rebel against the whole. And so this is where the hive mind notion comes from. Certainly, what we see is, ants. Ants, and small ants. Of course, there are ant beings that are very notorious in the ET community and off from various races and so on that have. In fact, Mark Richards cites at least 4 different ant beings that exist in the. I think he said it was the. It wasn't Orion. It was Alpha Centauri. So that's in my latest interview, by the way. I call it a total recall with Captain Mark Richards of the Secret Space Program. And when I visit him in prison, the reason I call it total recall is because I have to remember everything we talk about. And then right after the interview, when I leave the prison, I record it in an audio, and I also take notes if I'm given a pencil or a pen. And in the recent one, the number 7, I was given a crayon, a child's crayon, to record on paper my notes during the interview. So it's not the kind of thing where I actually get to put a camera in front of somebody's face and ask them questions. I wish it was. And it's a situation where I'm actually at the mercy of the prison system. And so this is what we get. But he nonetheless has been giving me a lot of information. Now I have 7 interviews, and actually just today I put them all on one post, you might say, on my website, so you can go there and see, all 7 interviews. They're all there, so you can click them very easily without having to search around. Lots and lots of information. There is a transcript, I believe, with each interview that does help you follow along watching the video, where I give an audio recall, audio video recall of what we talk about. So all of this does get into what kind of beings are out there, what's a hive mind versus what's not a hive mind, and that sort of thing.
Right. Now let's go back to the Secret Space Program, because Captain Mark Richards was part of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's in jail, and what would you say to people that to make him believe what he says is not being monitored or scripted by the Secret Space Program, because they know you're coming to the prison and getting his words and retranscripting what he said and so forth from memory, and what makes you believe that he's not scripted, or he's not one of their informants?
Well, he's quite a fascinating individual. First of all, you'd have to meet him, and I look forward to the day when the public can see him, on video and audio, like you do most of my witnesses. But until that time, his wife, Joanne Richards, is out on the circuit talking about the same things that he's talking about. She basically has been educated in a large way by him. He's a fascinating guy. Like I said, he comes from actually a lineage that's been part of our secret space program for several generations. So his grandfather, his father, and him all grew up and all were part of the secret space program. And Mark was, I believe he was arrested around 81 or 82, not sure the exact year. But he basically grew up living with it all around him and dealing with the various beings, etc. And he was a Navy captain, and his father was a member of the Air Force and had many dealings with MJ-12, which I do talk about in my latest interview with him. And then his grandfather also dealt with all of that. And so these, his father and his grandfather also were very much involved with Tesla, apparently, he has said. Now, there are records that Joanne has put forward, photographs and other documents that have shown and backed up his testimony. But you must understand that, of course, the fact that he's in prison, he's been framed for a murder he did not commit. In fact, he was off planet at the time. It was committed by two young men who claimed that they were under, or, following his orders or following his, influence or whatever. And so he wasn't the murderer. He was supposedly the mastermind. And we actually talk about recently in my interview with him that I highly recommend you listen to. He talks about how he became a threat to the secret space program and the powers that be, because not only his close relationship with what are called the raptor beings, which are a type of reptilian who have changed their ways and decided to align themselves with humanity and are working for us out in the galaxy and the multiverse at this time, backing up our troops, etc. But that he also is a person who has what you call a certain amount of charisma or influence, and people do tend to follow him. At least this was the pattern when he was a younger man. Now, of course, he's in prison. He is one of the highest rankings, if not the highest ranking military officer in the prison, which is a prison located in Vacaville, California. And that is where I go and interview him. And like I say, he's been there for over 30 years. So the plausible deniability that the secret space program has in place, in spite of the fact that I interview him, keeps this situation so that he can tell me things, and yet 90% of humanity will probably write him off just saying, oh, he's been in prison, don't listen to him. And so they know that this kind of syndrome goes on, and they plan on it, they bank on it. And I can tell you that he has told me, volunteered on his own, that he reports to Bobby Ray Inman, who is an admiral, very high-level admiral. He says he's one of the most knowledgeable people on the planet to do with the ET human situation, for what it's worth. He's still alive. And I can also tell you that an interesting coincidence or synchronicity, that William Tompkins, before he died, also on my interview, says that he reported to William Tompkins. William Tompkins reported to Bobby Ray Inman as well. So this is a fascinating clue, you might say, where two men who don't know each other is supposedly reporting to the same guy. So this is quite fascinating. You could say that's a clue to lead you into investigating further. What I do I am actually an investigative reporter. I am trained as a journalist in college, and I also worked in Hollywood for 20 years as an independent producer. And I can tell you that I'm also a documentary filmmaker. So I've been doing this for 11 and a half years on my own. We are funded by donations. And so what I do is, my drive is to get the truth out. And I do specialize in interviewing whistleblowers from above top secret. This is what Project Camelot is known for. I do ask the hard questions, and I keep an open mind. I'm highly intuitive. This has actually supported my work in a massive way over the years and made me quite aware of the deceptions out there, and proved true. In fact, I just had an incident today that just was a small personal item that, I got a download that something was going to happen, and indeed it did. All I can say is that these are the kinds of things that I rely on. I've also done a tremendous amount of investigation, and I've interviewed well over 600 people on video and done several years worth of audio whistleblower radio interviews as well. So my sort of outreach, I guess you might call it, is substantial. And so this is what I compile. I also use a technique used by the CIA, which has to do with triangulation. And that means if I get 3 or more contacts, completely unrelated, who don't know each other and don't know about each other's testimony, but they are saying the same thing, that we consider this to be what we call a red flag and worth following out and looking further into. So I'm not trying to persuade anyone that anything is absolute truth. All I can tell you is my background, how I've gone about getting this information, and how I've compiled it, and then you need to make your own judgments.
Right, exactly. I'm just relaying some listeners' questions from my end, from other sources as well, that always ask me, but if a secret space program needs to remain secret, why do they have those whistleblowers from inside within the program itself speak up about it? And there are some disinformants out there, among the whistleblowers. You mentioned 3 triangular sources that don't know each other. Well, you had like 2 that knew, actually obeyed or reported to the same admiral source. So are military sources or intel sources really reliable? Because we're in a predatory-based system, and everything is linked to the military. I mean, you were born on a military base yourself, and actually most of the abductees and the trauma-based victims also come from military families, and a lot of abductees and so-called hybrids also come from military families. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of military involvement in this predator work in underground bases and hybridization programs, and I've seen that since 2011. I've been interviewing a lot of people, worldwide, just like you did, but I haven't been traveling so much. But really, you have to ask yourself, why is there such a military involvement in keeping the secret behind closed doors, and also speaking up about it? So why those same sources are supposed to be reliable?
Well, actually, there's a number of books that have been written about the subject. Grant Cameron recently wrote a book. I think it's called something magic. I can't remember the name of it. I read that, and I can tell you it has a number of problems in terms of formatting and typos and things like that. So it needed to be reviewed again. But nonetheless, he is citing what he understands to be the reason for the release of what in essence is true stuff out in the mainstream and out in the alternative sectors. And this is actually a technique, and this does get back to the very people who are running all of it, which are called the Illuminati. And that's just sort of a bucket title for, the Bilderberg Group and the Committee of 300 and the usual suspects, right? And MJ-12, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at these individuals who are members of secret societies and the Vatican, as well as other CIA, NSA, you name it. And all of them are working together in what is in essence known as the secret space program, and also the secret government that is also hand in hand with it. So what you have is a drive to confuse and confound the people out there, to keep them guessing. But at the same time, there are leaks, there are whistleblowers, And some of them have been killed. Actually, I've had a few whistleblowers that I've interviewed who died in what I consider to be mysterious circumstances. In fact, you could even say that William Tompkins was eliminated recently, and I can tell you a little bit more about why that might be, and Jim Mars and others. So whenever someone dies, there's always a question as to why they die, how they die, if it was what we call natural causes, etc. And so what happens is there is a drive to put in front of you the left. They dominate. The Illuminati are in control of the left and the right at all times. And Jordan Maxwell would refer to this as both wings of, in essence, the eagle. That what he would say to some degree is the United States is one half and Russia is the other half. But this is all one bird. And they are constantly in control of both sides of the story. And in doing so, what they do is they feed both sides of the story. So sometimes they promote one side and sometimes they promote the other. And they understand the deeper significance of what is called the union of opposites. And they believe that low-level humans have trouble keeping two opposite concepts in their mind at the same time. They believe, this is done through mind control investigation, et cetera, that human beings often get totally confused when you tell them there's a left, and a right to something. They don't really know how to discern the difference and how to take the two on board simultaneously and understand them. So they play on this vulnerability in human beings, and this is why they dominate the left and the right. It also has to do with a larger question as to the fact that they want humans to know that they have told them the truth about what they're really doing. And their philosophy, which is an Illuminati philosophy, which has to do with black magic or all magic, has to do with the fact that if they tell you, they are then excused from any, what you might call karmic relationship with what might happen as a result of whatever they do. So if they tell you the truth before they do it, and you don't heed them, you don't get out of the way, then you're too stupid to live in their view, and you don't deserve to live, and therefore they've paid the karmic debt, and they are fine in terms of that kind of a very sticky type of thing that has to do with the reincarnational sort of program that goes on. So this is part and parcel of what's going on when they feed what is in essence disinfo out there, and they also put nuggets of truth, and they will continue to do that. Another thing that's happening right now to do with this has to do with the fact that what they've done over the last, let's say, 60 years or more, is they kind of have everything has sort of leaned over too much towards the dark. And they understand that there is a rebalancing that's going to happen because we live in what is called, a yin and yang universe. This sector, which is 3D going into 4D, you cannot escape the laws of this sector, and they know that. And so as a result of all of that, they understand that they will experience what is in essence the opposite of what they engender. So if they engender too much negative, they're going to get a hell of a lot of positive. They don't want that to happen. So right now what they are doing to alleviate like a tidal wave of positive, which is actually happening in our planet with humanity waking up their consciousness. What they want to do to alleviate that tidal wave is to slowly but surely release more and more truth, but it is encased in a lot of falsity. So this is why they feed the left and right. This is why you'll find some of the people in this sector actually at this time even being financed, which is, actually for the most part that hasn't happened. But I can tell you that I know for a fact people who have been sort of spokespersons in this sector, who have been fully employed by the CIA, NSA, working for the deep state, all the while pretending that they were alternative personalities out there trying to get the truth out. And I know individuals very well who I'm dealing with on an everyday basis who are still working both sides. There are people that have a desire to, in essence, kind of save their own hide, save their families. You can understand the impulse, right? And they cannot just go out and talk like I do and so forth. They are afraid. They are trying to balance the scales with regard to their families, and they are kind of dancing with the devil, if you will. And I can tell you, even recently, I had a whistleblower contact me. I'm not going to say where he's from, a former policeman. And he's got a big story to tell the world. But he was, right after he contacted me, contacted by the Illuminati, who have now told him that they will take care of his little problem, that will help his family be safe and so forth, if he just shuts up. And so he's taking this very seriously, and basically, for all intents and purposes, instead of coming out on my show, which he was thinking of doing, he's now probably going to shut up. This is a game, it's been played on planet Earth for eons really now, and this is how it goes.
Yeah, that happened to me with one X-Files actress who was supposed to be on the Project Camelot Network show that I planned on. And she was threatened she would lose her job or never find another one if she spoke up. So anyway, I'm not going to mention her name, but she's pretty famous. And yeah, let's go over a few names that you mentioned in your article. Goode, David Wilcock, William Tompkins, Gaia, the Gaia TV faction, you call them. They're backed, that backs in part, with their money, a portion of the secret space program under Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, the one admiral that you mentioned, right?
Well, let me say that that's not exactly what I wrote, and that's not exactly how it's laid out.
Okay.
So David Wilcock is operating on his own. He's also getting a lot of information and being persuaded to believe certain things that may or may not be true, like anyone. And Goode has his own agenda, and that agenda has also been made obvious by people who are, taking the time to do their own investigation. And William Tompkins, as well, had his own agenda. William Tompkins is the only one who has stated publicly of that group that he reports to Bobby Ray Inman. So it's important not to get these things confused or mixed up. Gaiam TV, of course, we don't know who they report to other than the head of Gaiam, which is Jurga, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name at this moment, but who I've met and had one-on-one discussions. He actually offered me to purchase items from my Project Camelot library, and I refused to sell to him. And I even met with him recently. I was on the Sean Stone show, who has now become part of Gaiam TV, or at least that was back in January of this year, 2017. And I can tell you that, again, Jurga had me in his office and asked me why I wouldn't give him even, the rights to put out my videos on his channel. And basically, I told him that I don't believe in monopolies, and that what he's trying to create is, in essence, a monopoly in the alternative sector. So this is a problem. This is, you might say, the commercialization that's happening to our sector that has been for a long time very fringe. But at this time, certain players like Goode, like, what's his name? The Blink 100 guy, forget his name. Anyway, I think I mentioned in my article.
Randy Cramer? No, I interviewed him too.
Yeah. And anyway, he is being financed. I mean, there are individuals who, again, are getting financing to sort of push out their point of view and their information that they're being fed from members of the secret space program, military and ex-military, and other walks of life that are involved in that whole story, including probably Congress people, etc. So this is kind of the playing field that we're sort of part of at this time. And yeah, there are a lot of divisions. There are a lot of sectors. There are people that are lying, and they're fully knowledgeable that they're lying. There are people that have a point of view that they're trying to push. Some of these people are really legitimately trying to do a good thing and fully believe they're trying to do a good thing. And sometimes they're making a mistake in some of their judgment calls. It's an easy thing to do. It's a very complex sector, you can appreciate. It's actually said, if I understand it correctly, at least scientists are saying now, that there are, in essence, billions of Earth-like planets in our galaxy. If I remember correctly, the actual number is something like billions. Anyway, it doesn't matter whether billions or trillions or millions or whatever it is. You can appreciate with that many Earth-like planets, to say nothing of all the other planets, that we're dealing with a huge, what is in essence a melting pot of races out there, that some of which are artificial intelligence, some of which are, carbon, some are silicon, all that kind of thing. So we're really dealing with a very complex story, and it's understandable that some of these people who are trying to get their minds around it and trying to make a living, trying to become a major spokesperson in the sector for whatever motivated reason they have, and so on and so forth, can get some things wrong. I'm sure that I may have some things wrong. It's just goes with the territory. But I think the difference between them and me, Project Camelot, has to do with the history, number one, and the way I operate, which for one thing has to do with the fact that I am something of a renegade, that I have not been bought and paid for, and that I am supported by the people, with, in essence, a grassroots financed organization. And that continues to be the case today. And so what that does is give me a certain independence. And it's also my radical state of mind, because I came into this sector fully aware that I was a rebel at heart. I consider myself to be that. And I also was like that in college, writing articles on, Maya Angelou and Angela Davis. And I guess I'm dating myself, but nonetheless, I was, I'm fully steeped in, unlike most people in this area, I studied socialism and, communism and fascism and you name it. And, feminism, et cetera, et cetera. And I was looking at how to change the world since I was very young. So I have made it my study to look at the sector, to keep myself aware of, the political aspect, the social aspect, the psychological aspect, as well as the spiritual aspect, of which you cannot discuss all of this without getting into the fact that we may be part of a hologram, that there is a source, that we are connected to source. I do not have a doom and gloom view of reality like a lot of people do. Again, September 23rd, end of the world, right? No, it didn't happen. So, I get every other day someone writes to me saying, end of the world, something's going to happen tomorrow or whenever it is. Right. It's, I don't think they fully understand this incredible complexity that we're part of. And I do always recommend the Ashiana Dean Voyager books. There's 2 of them. They're on the front page of my website. One of them's available in a PDF for $17.99, quite cheap. But it can give you an overview of this sector and all of the different races that has never been put out there in any other form, guaranteed, and far better than the so-called Bible. So this is what we're really looking at.
Actually, those whistleblowers in the secret space program might as well be pretty honest, because if they have worked through an MK Ultra type of program, mind control program, and their altars have been actually altered and programmed that way, they probably think they're telling the truth, all those whistleblowers. So until the day the trigger comes around and they get deprogrammed, and they go nuts, just like the Hollywood or showbiz singers today. Well, I'm not going to mention them, but they're pretty famous. There are some famous videos out there, and I think Fritz Springmeier, who got actually entrapped by a lawsuit that he was set up, mentioned that in his work. All those altars and mainstream personalities that have been put up there to perpetuate the mind control, the Illuminati mind control symbolisms onto the people.
Sure. Yes, some of these people are victims of that and are being used. Others are waking up and making some very important statements, putting their own lives in danger to do so. And so kudos to them.
Right. Precisely. That's what I wanted to mention also, this MK Ultra programming. Let's go over the other factions that you mentioned in your article, the Tom DeLonge faction, the various top military brass, and the division of CIA and Open Minds TV. You mentioned that in your article. Stephen Greer faction associated with a portion of the CIA. Well, I know he mentions a lot of. He's into all the ETs are good, and the human military is evil. Well, he's been sponsored by the CIA and probably some reptilian factions.
Right. Also, Tom DeLonge, which is the Blink 180 or whatever his bands was called, he is also, he has an opinion too, from what I understand, at least what I read about him says that he believes all ETs are bad. So you've got Stephen Greer saying they're all good, and you've got Tom DeLonge saying they're all bad. So they're the Illuminati is basically funding both sides, and again, promoting both sides. And those guys are both wrong, because as above, so below, and we have both good ones and bad ones, so to speak.
But the ones that are actually ruling our shadow government cannot be that good. If you look at the Planet Report today, I mean, we're just destroying our environment. We're destroying life as it is.
Yes, but I do want to say that there is a faction of the Navy that I've become aware of that Mark Richards is part of as well. And very likely William Tompkins was to some degree, although it did seem he was taken offline towards the end of his life for various reasons. But nonetheless, I think the impulse in a part of the secret space program, a part associated with the Navy, does have a positive attitude towards humanity, is trying to turn themselves around, realizes they have sort of gotten in bed with the devil in the case of the Greys, for example, and made treaties that they shouldn't have made with various races, and they are trying to turn that ship around. So that is something we are part of at this time, and we are, witnessing, I guess you might say, in basically for all intents and purposes.
Yes, there's also this faction, Bassett, Stephen Bassett, Rich Dolan, and all those big disclosure conferences that have led nowhere, basically, except a bunch of guys in suit and tie and connected to the government.
I wouldn't say they led nowhere. I mean, I think Stephen Bassett has done some good work, as has Rich Dolan. I can tell you that, as I've said recently, actually, that Stephen Bassett did not want my witnesses to be part of those conferences. He actually told me to my face, or me. And the reason was he felt we were too advanced and that people couldn't handle the truth, which is the paternalistic view of the Illuminati, of course, and a lot of the military. And in essence, he has done some very good things trying to get the word out. In other words, a lot of these people are doing good things. They're working to get the truth out. They may not be perfect. They may be making some wrong decisions along the line. I was part of the citizens' hearing on disclosure. I went there. I did several interviews. You can watch them on my YouTube channel with Paul Hellyer and other whistleblowers at the time. And it was a fascinating, excellent effort to get the truth out to a group of Congress people, ex-Congress people, who then could perhaps go turn the wheels of government, maybe. But what happened even on the second day was they were starting to get the gist of what was being said and starting to ask the real questions having to do with what I cover in my whistleblowers. And they didn't have anyone to answer them. But basically they were saying, who the hell is running this game? Why don't we know about it? And who's in control? And this is, cutting to the chase. And so this is a good thing that these people were jumping, over years of what has to be years of education that they really need to go through. It is a wonderful thing that humanity is part of this ability to, in essence, learn through an osmosis to, you could call it the 100th monkey syndrome if you want, but it's basically because we are telepathic. It's not that we're a hive mind, but we are totally a receiver and a sender, each of us, and that we're starting to realize in the presence of all those amazing whistleblowers that there was something afoot that was much more profound and extensive than what even those whistleblowers were willing to reveal. So this is a fascinating dynamic, and I think that you would sell them short in other people short if you didn't acknowledge the good they're doing to try to get the truth out. It's a very hard struggle to turn this ship of the planet Earth around and to bring people into awareness. And you are one of the people doing a great job out there, so some of these people are doing excellent work as well.
But isn't disclosure, ET disclosure in general, overall, always recouped by government or secret government? Because we can see that they would have an interest in, like Mark Richards said, disclosing something at the wrong moment to create panic, and so they would actually be able to take over during that panic moment. But we're in 2017, and billions of humans still don't know that we're not alone in the multiverse. With all the sci-fi movies and series and documentaries and whistleblowers out there and alternative media, this looks like a test to human collective mind, remaining blind forever.
Yes, I know it's challenging and crazy. I agree with you, but I guess maybe because I'm Project Camelot and we get a lot of emails, and I meet people like in Ireland who come up to me, and they're waking up everywhere. They really are, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. So it doesn't really matter that there's a sort of a negative impulse to keep people not knowing the truth. The fact is the truth is now out there, and there's really nothing they can do about it. And I think they know that. It's just a matter of the sort of game that's being played now is how do they spin it? And what's interesting also is the fact that you've got a lot of mainstream journalists who are so deaf, dumb, and blind. It's unbelievable. And some of them are paid to be that way. I get that. But others of them have to be more intelligent than following a paycheck. Some of them actually have to have a heart, etc., and an intelligence. And they have to know there's a lot more to the story that they're not pursuing and they're not revealing. So what's interesting, though, is that this kind of sector that we're part of, call it the alternative sector, is the voice is getting louder and louder, and it's growing and growing in momentum. And I don't think it can be stopped at this juncture. And I do think that we are going to reach critical mass. In fact, I think we've already reached critical mass. Maybe I'm more optimistic than most people. But nonetheless, and I think what that means is that there's going to be a sea change out there. And I do want to say a caveat, if there is anyone watching this who is part of the mainstream and has no idea what's really going on, that it's fascinating to me that people that write for newspapers every day, reporting stories, are not digging down to get to the real truth. And when you report the news, especially what's happening to do with the wars on planet Earth and what's happening with humanity on every juncture, if you don't bring the secret space program into it and the secret government and what they've been doing for the last 50, 60 years, and the fact that they've gone off planet and have bases on Moon and Mars and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, etc., and are going interstellar. If you don't get that, how can you even report the news responsibly? You don't understand why something is happening. You don't understand why a false flag is even being done. It's not, the story is not limited. It doesn't stop at that base level that everyone wants to think it stops at, which is, the ground on planet Earth. It goes way deep underground, goes way off the planet. It goes into to inner Earth. It goes into other dimensions. I mean, we're talking about a story which is so complex, but in the end of the day, it has to do with who we really are, what we're capable of. And this is the unfolding that we're seeing on planet Earth. So I don't see it in a negative way. I see humanity waking up. It's stumbling. It's not doing really well in some areas. Certainly the people bought and paid for by the military-industrial complex are not helping the matter. But they're waking up, and slowly but surely, all they have to do is trip and fall one time. All they have to do is see one UFO, and their whole world, paradigm changes. And then they start to change the way they operate. And it does happen. I've seen it happen, and it continues to happen.
Well, it's a trigger to discern or acknowledge that there are some invisible shepherds that have, their biggest, I think, performance to me so far is to have remained invisible to most of the human farm out there. We're in the farm. What do you think of this NASA official program that looks more and more like CGI graphics to educated eye today? I mean, we work with various software programs, and we do some special effects on our own computers at home, and we can, I mean, with a non-biased eye, we can see there's CGI. I mean, it's so obvious. And the Soyuz rockets that they've used 40 years ago, they're still supposedly sending people in the ISS into space with it when our cell phones are miniatures, so there's with official technology, the way it's presented to us. I mean, people don't see that. It looks like they're totally blinded by the mass hypnosis and mind control from the media.
Yes, I understand that. But again, all they have to do is look. It's happening slowly but surely. It's happening one individual at a time. And it is happening. It is a mass change on planet Earth. So all I can say is, this is the progress. And as far as the ETs, how they stay hidden for so long, in my world, they're not hidden. In my world, I actually see them walking around. I meet them at conferences, and we are them. This is part of the puzzle, if you will. So if you don't even acknowledge and don't understand what you're made of, it's hard for you to see. It's kind of like, I don't know if if this is really the truth, but they say when Columbus discovered or just supposedly discovered America, which he didn't really do, but nonetheless, when he came to America, to the shores, the Indians or the Native Americans, whatever you want to call them, could not see his ship. That's what they reported. They couldn't see it because it wasn't part of their reality. So that's kind of a good analogy for what's really happening now. This is a brave new world. And I've even had people call me or contact me and say, oh, I'm desperate to see a UFO, but I don't see any. And I'm like flabbergasted because all I have to do is walk outside and, I think it's a like UFO highway out there. They're constantly going by. And all you have to do is look up, and be a little patient, and to say nothing of the unseen individuals that are here visiting us from fourth and higher, that are even here in the room with me right now, supporting me in my work and you in your work, and so on. So yes, they can go interdimensional, but you know what? So can we. We are remote viewing, military remote viewers will tell you one of the first things they tried to do, is go through walls. There's a reason for that, because they understand that signal non-locality means that we're in contact constantly. There is no such thing as really distance the way we envision it. And so, I actually have a recent interview with Eamon Ansborough. He's an astronomer and a doctor of astronomy, I think is what you would call him. And he's talking about contacting using a certain quantum mechanics that has to do with superluminal travel or superluminal, space, a communication device, I guess. And it's quite fascinating. He's involved in this. He knows the secret space program exists. He knows they've made treaties with these beings. I mean, the reports, there's so much information out there. If you dig, you can find it. But the fact is that he still wants to get in touch with other races that are out there, and he wants them to get in touch with him. And, it's valid. Sometimes you talk to people over a phone, and sometimes over Skype, and sometimes over some other technology, and sometimes we're telepathic and we just know things about each other. I mean, this is what we're talking about. So communication with these beings of which we are a part, they're not hidden. They're here. It's just that people are blind, and they are blinded by the state and by the mind control and by their, the constant television and the poor food and the fluorescent lights and, you name it, the dumbing down. But nonetheless, even in spite of all of the negative, humans, again, are waking up, and I see it every day. That's all I can say. And, they're coming to the conferences, they're writing to me, they're watching my work, and I'm sure they're watching you.
Yes, you're familiar, I suppose, with Robert Monroe's Louche concept, right?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, he mentioned something in his book about the emitter that projects the hologram and illusion. He also talks about what are basically interconnected oversouls. And finally, he mentioned something about attaining the required escape velocity to exit probably the matrix. He wrote, from experience, the collectors have evolved an entire technology with complementary tools for the harvesting of louche from the type 4M units. The most common have been named love, friendship, family, greed, hate, pain, guilt, disease, pride, ambition, ownership, possession, sacrifice, and on a larger scale, nations, provincialism, wars, famine, religion, machines, freedom, industry, trade, to list a few. Louche production is higher than ever before. We're indeed producing something of value, louche. Louche is an energy.
Well, it's actually, just to sum it up, it's really what we call orgone in the West and Kundalini energy in the East. Right. I do, talks on this subject. And the bottom line is, in essence, what they call the ether, what Pete Peterson called the information field, this substance of which we are a part, and also that what we can generate from our own bodies, which is even a more complex version of that. And what is by some called water H3O2. So there's all of this. Yes, you're talking about harvesting of, the blood and the fluids of the human body, and so forth by reptilians and greys, and they feed on this. Yes, I'm very well aware of it all. So what is the question?
The question was, aren't we just in a big farm, and we are divine animals that are being deceived and just fed up on?
Well, I would say the way I look at it is that we as humanity here on planet Earth have predators. And those predators, unfortunately, humanity has not been made aware of the predators out there. The the fact that we have predators is not really surprising, and I don't even think it's necessarily, if you will, a negative thing. It is part of the sort of design of the yin and yang universe, which promotes growth. It's you may call it a negative growth pattern, but nonetheless, it does create greater intelligence, more development among the beings that do survive. And a loose way of referring to it could be survival of the fittest. But there is reason to believe that having a certain amount of obstacles in one's way as a human in development here on planet Earth using this body, that it can be very help facilitate growth in essence. So I don't think getting kind of hung up about the fact that lots of beings and animals, et cetera, have predators. You could say man is a predator of a lot of animals and plants and insects, sex as well. It is a sort of, pecking order, I guess you might say, in some ways. But nonetheless, you can escape it all. You can rise above it. You can transcend it. That's what developing on this planet and moving off this planet is all about. This is what your soul, developing the crystal, which is your soul, your ability to time travel and to move out of this sector, your ability to leave the sort of cycle of birth and death, et cetera, et cetera. This is what it's all about.
But don't you think sometimes there's this general feeling that things are not getting better, they're getting worse, and that we're going to an all AI civilization towards that, or a more mafia-ruled, Vatican, satanic ruled society on one hand, because all spirituality has been hacked by monotheist religions, and they're all Satanists at the head of the very top of them. Each one of them. I mean, the Vatican, the Judaism, and the Wahhabites. With Islam, they're all Satanists. I mean, how do you explain that? With their blood rituals, sacrifice, pedophilia, and so forth. And there's still this 1% of the shadow government ruled by probably manipulated by archons or archonic collective, which may not be only ETs. Actually, I think this energy, this parasites actually make themselves look like ETs. Then they may not be all ETs. There's still 1% of the population that is ruling 99% of the rest of the population, and they don't seem to actually progress, make improvement, because their memories are erased. We don't learn from our social complex. Our social complex is totally erased, uneducated. We don't.
Well, all I can tell you is that I do understand what you're looking at, but I am seeing progress. I am seeing a movement and an awakening on planet Earth. And I can say that I think it's kind of a deception to think that things were better in the old days. I think that people were just more deceived in the old days. But, during the time of Atlantis, we had quite a rise in consciousness, and there were many ET visiting races here at that time, and they were intermingling with the humans, et cetera, some to positive end and some to more negative ends. But nonetheless, in other words, humanity has kind of had a sort of more of a rise and a fall. It's more of that kind of a wave, I guess you might say, of enlightenment. But the progress, my understanding in terms of this time that I'm alive in this incarnation, my understanding is that we have gone beyond, in terms of awakening, that any other version of humanity here on planet Earth, and that there is an ascension path and quality that is open to all individual beings as well as some groups, and that this has been made possible because humanity has woken up. We are spirit first and physical, bodies incarnating here on Earth second. So we come here for the experience of it, for the game of it, for the to promote this incredible experiment to see where it leads. Ultimately, I think, from what I understand, even in the Wingmakers material, they talked about creating a being that is going to be a composite of 7 races that includes this version of humanity. So this is, there are no limits to, in essence, Godhead or the creative mind or the creator, if you will. And so we are creators in training. We are creators here on planet Earth. There is a larger composite being, if you want to call it that. Some people call it God, some people call it source, some people call it the force. Call it what you will, but it's made up of everything. It is constantly evolving and really expanding, from what I understand. And I don't think we have as big a problem in the sense that you're seeing it sort of in a downward spiral, but I think there's a very strong upward spiral as well. I'm not denying that there is a downward portion. There are people that are regressing, that are basically not becoming aware, that are not waking up, et cetera, et cetera. This is the nature, again, of this sort of yin and yang of this sector and the sort of laws that go along with it. So I think you have to acknowledge that that's the nature of what we're part of. What we really are trying to do here on planet Earth is in a sense bring it back to the middle. We're not trying to make it all positive, and we're not trying to make it all negative. We're trying to bring it back to balance and to where people have a fair shot at really developing in spite of the yin-yang quality and the laws of this sector. So that's what we really want to do, those of us that are working towards the good.
Right, a balance situation. But if we look honestly at the humanity's track record in history, we see deluge, we see some blackout periods, resets, genocides, wars, and after wars, and more wars, and it's just duality galore, and it doesn't seem to end with the bodies we have today. I mean, they have the same masters; they're just different actors.
I think I've answered this question. I really do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Damon T. Barry, for example, he's a filmmaker. I don't know if you know him. He's an Afro-American guy who did the Nowhere. I forgot the name of the series he did, but he talks about every few thousand years there's some kind of blackouts and all memories are erased, and basically the human beings doesn't remember what happened before, and there's a reset. And there's new civilizations that comes out. I mean, I'm sure there's you believe too, and you've dealt with forbidden archaeology discoveries and so forth, and archaeologists.
I think you have to keep in mind that, again, what I said before has to do with where humanity is now. Right. I understand that a pattern has been set in the past on planet Earth. There are reasons for that, but I firmly believe that that pattern has been broken in essence.
Okay, well, it doesn't seem that obvious from
I get that.
And this ascension may be just the ascending Jupiter movie and the big harvest at the end of the end cycle. So
I think you really have to leave it to the listener to discern for themselves what they feel is happening. First of all, their own exposure to this thing we call being alive on the planet now. And also looking at the new children and what's really developing. And you really have to make your own discernment as to what you think is happening. And so with all due respect to the question being asked, I still say, I've basically answered it. And I think that the trend has been sort of broken, if you mean the pattern, this sort of basically, there's a reason why the spiral is the basic unit, the basic symbol of all cultures. And that has to do with the fact that we are not going around in a circle endlessly. We're actually spiraling up. And yes, there are some people that are spiraling down in the process, but there is an upward spiral. And I think that answers it pretty succinctly.
Right. Well, not everyone is going to be moving up, basically. So
that's true.
Sure.
Absolutely.
What do you think of the NDR stories? I know I've interviewed Wayne Bush recently on your channel, a couple of interviews. He mentioned a lot of NDR's stories. They talk about some type of technology in the astral world afterwards, after death, well, after physical life, after they got back. So there's, they mention several possibilities. One is darkness, chaos. The other one is the void. Another one is the false life or false light or impure light. And the fourth one is the true light, the pure light. What do you think this scenario is like? I mean, pertaining to their testimonies, because there are many on this site called nderf.org. I don't know if you've listened to the interview, but it's pretty interesting.
Well, I mean, it's not really saying anything that's not obvious. So I don't find anything of, special note there. It's really, I don't think it's very, very deep. I don't, there's nothing there that's really jumping out at me.
Right. So,
saying there's light and there's, pure light. And I mean, these are just, terminologies. Every human is on a developmental trail, and they are making free choices along the way as to what they want to do, what they want to experience, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think it's up to any one group to determine what's somebody else's, sort of destiny or pure light, or to make a judgment about someone else. I just don't think that that's appropriate.
Right. And what do you think Hollywood is, what kind of role do they play in the big scheme of disclosure and false disclosure and intel information that's being spread out, and consent also?
Well, I think Hollywood is both a positive and negative force for change. So there are a lot of, I worked in it for 20 years. I encountered people that are very devoted to changing the world. I myself wanted to use sci-fi movies to basically reveal the stuff that I'm revealing instead through documentaries, simply because I couldn't break into the game, at least back in those days, to make the kind of movies that would reveal what I'm revealing now through Whistleblowers. Perhaps that was my destiny, you could say. But nonetheless, I do see some very positive things happen in Hollywood. I see positive messages in a lot of the movies, and I see a very negative, reptilian, satanic, basically information being pushed on people in a massive way. So it's a huge sort of light and dark cacophony, I guess you might say.
There's a connection between Hollywood and Freemasonry. Even the Ancient Aliens series is pushing the Masonic agenda in many of its episodes. I'm not going to mention them now because it's not the topic, but there are many. What do you think the Masons? What is the Masons' role behind ufology and Hollywood and cinema in general? Because they seem to be very implied and
disclosure, raiding parties. Humans are abducted permanently off the surface of Earth and have many uses to visiting races. First of all, as a food source for the reps and greys and maybe others. Allies. Slaves for building things, serving various races, trading, bartering. Study, as in scientific study. Earth is a desirable vacation spot. Access to minerals, precious stones, topside use of land. Underground bases jumping off point to other systems. Breeding and genetic programs with human females. Black star, dark star energy. Used to power spacecraft. This type of energy is highly prized in the multiverse. It puts humans on the level with other ET races. They don't appreciate that.